Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to Soar Financially, a channel where we look at the macro to understand the micro better. And my name's Kai Hoffman. I'm the CEO of the Soar Financial Group, and I'm joined by Matt Badiali. Matt, it's great to finally meet you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kai.
We've both been in the industry forever, but we always
Yeah.
never cross paths.
That's right.
Right? You're the CEO of Quetzal Copper and also publisher of Mangrove Investors.
Yep.
Why don't you quickly introduce yourself? And
Sure.
then we'll dive into a big discussion about critical minerals, copper, and what the hell is going on in the world.
Well, I am a geologist by education. So I was in the middle of a PhD program, and a friend of mine called me, Dr. Steve Sugarroot, and he said, we're creating this newsletter. We want it to be kind of the Sports Illustrated of oil and gas and mining investment, and we'd love for you to come and help us build it out.
I was going to say cover model, but
hardly. But and so at the time we were getting ready to have our first child. I had been in graduate school forever, and so I went over and helped these guys. This was Stansberry Research in 2005, and so I came and built their natural resource letter. Had a great time. Learned a lot about kind of how to analyze companies, and then pretty quickly realized that the newsletter business that I was in and the newsletter business in Canada were very different. So I've often had to defend what I was doing, versus because back then we weren't allowed to invest in any of the companies we covered. We were strictly subscription based, and we were working for our readers. And so, but that was a great way to kind of.
Isn't that the way it should be, by the way?
We don't want to throw anybody under the bus,
Okay.
I got some pushback from people who were like, "Well, you don't have any skin in the game, so how can you actually tell us what to do?" And I said, I'm an observer, which means that I can look the CEO in the eye and listen to the story, and then come home to my readers and say, we need to sell this. I'm not conflicted at all.
No.
And it also helps when you're, I think I had 130,000 paid subscribers, and you can move a market in junior mining
with
companies.
that many.
Yeah. And so that was better all the way around. But what it allowed me to do, it gave me a front row seat for about 17 years on seeing how juniors were run. Both the good, the bad, and the really, really ugly. And so I learned a lot. And I've been approached in the past about running a company, and I always said no. It was usually, it was a retread. Somebody had beat it up and they just needed someone to step in, or it was an opportunity that somebody had where they thought they could leverage the newsletter thing. Yeah. But I kind of was out of the mainstream newsletters in 2020. I launched my little letter, Mangrove Investor, which is really about energy markets, because we have this big pivot in energy. We can talk about that. And then I was approached by a friend of mine, Charles Funk, who runs Heliostar Metals. And he had these copper projects. His company's a gold company. And these are really interesting projects that they're exploration stage, but they're drill ready. And typically I go through projects and I'm like, no. All right, I'm done. So I went through the projects, and there was all four of them. There's 3 in BC and 1 in Mexico and Chihuahua. And I went, I like all these. And I said to Charles, how did you get your hands on these? And it's a combination of a terrible market, and there's no capital. It's a very illiquid market right now. And they were in the hands of groups that either they needed money, or they wanted to see if they could have someone who really could market them. But they're brilliant projects. I'm really excited about it. And so I agreed to come on and be the new CEO, and we'll be public shortly.
Fantastic.
So,
we'll talk about Quetzal Copper later in the conversation.
Yeah.
Really interesting opportunity. Let's zoom out a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. Like, question is maybe why copper. Let's start there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of going on on the macro side.
Absolutely.
Right now, copper's under massive pressure.
Yeah.
We're only trading at $3.60 a pound.
Yeah.
It's been worse, but it's been way better before as well. Okay. What is influencing the copper price right now? What are you seeing? What are the market dynamics?
I spent a lot of time reading about this stuff, because I know where I'm not an expert, and copper's a giant market, right? And there's a lot of inputs, a lot of demand, a lot of supply, and you have to really kind of parse through it. So I turned to a guy named Daniel Yergin. He's the head of S&P. I forget. He's the author of the prize, won a Pulitzer Prize for that book called The Prize, which was the history of oil markets. So he's really, I would consider him the preeminent expert in energy. and they just put out a big paper on S&P did on copper. And basically he said, look, if you know how copper, or you know how the oil market is very constrained. It's kind of controlled. I think 40% of the oil market is controlled by 3 countries, basically. And so that's really a cabal, right? You have these countries that are able to put undue influence on the price of oil. Well, 38% of the copper market is in the hands of 2 countries. And so we're effectively trading oil for copper as we electrify. And that's where we're headed. The entire world is headed that way. I mean, if you look at the legislation that was passed in the States, the Inflation Reduction Law or whatever that poorly named thing was, they've created a tailwind for consumption of these energy metals, of lithium, of copper, nickel, cobalt, by saying, if you buy these electric vehicles, we'll give you a $7,500 tax break. But the problem is you have to source all of your metals from either inside North America or with a trading partner of the U.S. And that's very difficult.
That's a very tough ask, yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why in the legislation they have excluded copper from the kind of the critical metals list, because it's going to be really difficult to meet that supply from within North America and trading partners.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there was just a court decision as well that they won't review their critical metals list until like 2025, right? I think that was just passed yesterday, that judgment, because people were suing, saying, hey, you need to include copper here.
Well, you do. I mean, we talk about lithium batteries, but there's more copper in a lithium battery than there is lithium, right?
Well, didn't you put a post up on your website showing like by weight?
Yeah.
Like how much goes into a battery. I think lithium is by weight only 4%.
People don't understand that, right? And so it's very simple, right? It's there. But we talk about lithium and people seem to think that lithium is this rare, unusual mineral, and it's really not. It's just nobody cared about it for so long. I mean, the big SQM, the big lithium producer, they were potash producer. They're making fertilizer, and lithium was an unexpected byproduct, right? And so, and in the past, it was like, what do you use it for? Well, it's this white metal we use in like grease and paint. Then the next thing you know, the batteries just blew up. It was a huge surge. I mean, yesterday Ford came out with their partnerships. Did you see that?
I saw something. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to follow up on it.
They're making deals, offtake agreements with lithium miners in North America. Okay. So Nemaska, there's a whole bunch of them, and this is it's very unusual to me to see an end consumer making agreements with kind of producers in this way, where they know the supply is going to be tight.
Yeah, so it's Compass Minerals, Albemarle,
that's it. Yep.
Nemaska, Energy Source Minerals, SQM you mentioned. Yep. So really interesting.
Yeah, really interesting. A car maker, making deals with miners. I mean, to me, it's a great thing, because the one thing that mining companies have universally is a shortage of cash.
No, it's true. And like I had a discussion late last year with the General Consul of Germany here in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. He's like, we're desperate for projects. Show us whatever you can. Yeah. And we'll send it downstream. Right. Now Volkswagen is in Canada investing big. Right. Yeah. So it's happening. So
Volkswagen, Mercedes, Tesla, GM, Ford. I mean, they're investing in mining companies. So we're seeing it started in lithium. I think we're going to see it in cobalt. I think we're going to see it in nickel, where you have these companies, the end users are going to be injecting capital into the space we've been bereft of that for so long. Because mining is a terrible business, right? You're a price taker on both ends, right? It's a commodity swap. So the cost of the steel and the concrete and the diesel fuel and the labor has to be offset by the cost or the price of the metal, but you don't get to set the price. Like Apple gets to set the price of their iPhone, but you don't. You're at the whims of the market, Absolutely. And so it's an absolutely ridiculous business.
Yeah. Well, Tesla just started construction on their own lithium refinery as well. So that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, so. And it needs to happen. I mean, that's where there needs to be capital in the market for that sort of thing.
Okay, let's stay on copper. Let's look a bit of the pipeline of projects and what you're seeing in the market as well. Like, I was joking. I was telling you beforehand before we hit the record button. It was like I had a discussion with a friend the other day. Where it was like, "Oh yeah, what's a mid-sized copper producer?"
Yeah.
And I was like, That's a very solid question.
Yeah.
After a couple minutes of thinking, it's like, oh, Copper Mountain.
Right.
And maybe Hud Bay, but they just merged.
Yes.
Well, actually, Hud Bay bought Copper Mountain.
Yeah.
So who's left?
I mean,
let's talk about it.
It's a good question, and it's one that I think investors need to be paying attention to, because you have producers like Hud Bay. The list of good development projects is pretty short. Yeah. And like you said, they don't just roll off the tongue. There are a few. I'd have to pull up my to get on the computer, because they're not there, right? Ivanhoe Electric, I like Ivanhoe Mines. They're kind of mixed metal producers, but they're great projects. But yeah, after that, Turquoise Hill, but that's Rio. I mean, and then what we're seeing already, and what we're going to see a lot more of, is retreads from the last copper cycle that are projects that really didn't go anywhere back when, in 2008, 9, 10, 11, when the copper price peaked the last time. You're going to see people they're going to come out, brush them off, rename them twin holes, and market the heck out of them. And investors are going to get fleeced again. You're going to have to be very careful about what you invest in that exploration stage. So,
in Mangrove Investor, like what's your theory there? Your thesis of investing when you talk copper and critical minerals there?
I'm looking for really good development projects, and I'm looking for really good teams. So we have Ivanhoe Electric and Ivanhoe Mines is in our portfolio for that, because Robert Friedland's the best marketer. And the other thing about Friedland is he attracts the best people, right? If you have a choice between working for Moose Pasture Metals and Robert Friedland, you're going to go work for Robert. Hands down, he's the guy you want to work for. When I was in graduate school, that was ExxonMobil. Like, if you could get on the ExxonMobil exploration research development team, you're going to Exxon, right? It was the Death Star of the oil industry. And Friedland's not quite ExxonMobil, but he's going to attract the best talent. That new Ivanhoe Electric deal that he has is a little confusing. They have some really interesting projects. They have some really good financial backing. We were talking about Saudi Arabia came in with the financing. He has that Typhoon system that's very interesting. It's geophysics on a bigger scale, using AI to create targets, to generate new targets. I mean, I'm interested in what he's doing. So that's what we're looking for at Mangrove.
Interesting. Okay. At Mangrove, like I went on your website and I saw ethical investing.
Yes.
Okay. So that's something that stuck out to me, because I'm curious, like what does that really mean?
Yeah. I mean, ethical is probably not the right word. I like conscientious, but it doesn't really roll off the tongue when you're marketing. But it's something that the mining industry has been doing for at least a decade now, right? It's community engagement, community involvement. Being a good neighbor. Like in the States, we passed a law that said corporations have the ability to speak, right? And they can and we consider speech to be, political speech, whatever. Corporations can speak. Well, that means if they have the ability to speak, they ought to have the ability, or they ought to have they ought to be good neighbors and good community members. And with mining and oil and gas, you can't. Once you've invested all that money in a mine, you can't take it and leave, right? You can, if you're a t-shirt maker and the stuff goes south in your community and there people are angry at you, you build a new factory somewhere else. Mines are stuck, right? Rocks are rocks. They stay where they are regardless of the politics. And so the mining industry has been doing kind of that conscientious investing for years now, simply by becoming good neighbors. Right. And I would point to Charles Funk and Heliostar, just because they're front of mind to me. They got a brownfields project in Alaska called Unga. It had been explored since the turn of the century. And, companies had gone, and it was expensive to go out there. It's in the Aleutian Island chain. So you're going to bring diesel tanks out there. You're going to bring 55-gallon drums. You're going to bring bulldozers out there. Once you run out of money, you're not taking them back because it's expensive. So when they got out there, one of the first things they did was invest a couple, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 in cleaning the site up. right? Taking the diesel tanks off, cleaning them out, recycling them, shipping them off the island, right? Yeah. So the first thing they did, and it's, I believe in investing kind of the way I live. And so I participate in beach cleanups. Nobody pays me to do that. I take my time, right? And I go out and take my kids and we'll go pick up debris off our beach.
Well, you often find fossils as well.
I do. Yeah. All right. So, but I am.
There's an ulterior motive there.
There is, but I believe that if a company, any kind of company, has an outsized impact on their community, and we live in our communities, and so if you're going to have an outsized impact on the community, it should be positive, not negative, right?
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. Okay, I get that part. I got to backtrack a little because you mentioned when you were writing the newsletter for Stansberry and Agora, you had 120,000 to 160,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
All on junior mining.
In natural resources in general. No.
Because I'm mind blown by that number.
We would blow people, we would blow market caps up if we had all those people in juniors.
No, I'm just trying to understand like the market size of investors that invest in junior mining.
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask you realistically, how many investors would be left right now, or how many subscribers would be left, or the investor size pool? Because looking at the volumes on the venture these days, I think of those, let's assume 120,000, 100,000 at least buggered off into some other industry.
They did. They were led off. When I started writing the letter, you had a combination of investors, and I know this from speaking to people at conferences. You had some people were gold bugs, right? They firmly believe in gold as money, and they wanted opportunities. They wanted leverage at the gold price. You had the kind of the folks who understood the power of discovery. So they were often, you had investors in junior mining were also investors in biotech, where they were making new drugs, that sort of thing, because it's that risk to reward.
It's a similar industry. It's
very
similar.
Comparable.
You go through the FDA stages of approval, and you got the economic studies in mining, right?
Right, and these were folks that had risk capital that they could deploy in that space, right? And then you just had the wackadoo speculators, right? These were people. I can't tell you. I would talk to people at conferences and we'd talk about what we were investing in and pounding the table on Iraqi dinar. The Iraqi dinar's got to go up in value because, Iraq's coming out of the war and it's going to be the best. I'm like, you don't understand how money works, do you? And a lot of those investors they would follow the fad investing. So they were all in tech, right? So, they were invested in pets.com or they followed the cannabis, and then they followed the cryptocurrencies and the NFTs. And so, man, if you were unskilled and fad driven, you're out of money now. And that's why that's
what we're seeing right now, it seems like.
Yes.
Because right now there's no competition.
Yeah.
It feels like from other industries, Bitcoin has sort of died off.
I agree.
That trend. Cannabis has disappeared, destroyed billions of dollars.
Yeah.
I saw a number the other day. It was 5 billion, even more, somewhere around there. I have to find a statistic. But that's insane. That's money missing now in the junior sector.
And it's not just in junior mining. I mean, one of the reasons that the oil industry kind of contracted dramatically, at least in the States, but really it was internationally was the shale revolution was so unbelievable. The potential was so enormous that it attracted all kinds of capital. People who've been sitting on the sidelines came into, and they were using price assumptions. I went to dinner with a couple of bankers in Midland, Texas. A friend of mine set the thing up, and we had this was 2014 maybe. And their price assumption, their rock bottom price deck that they were lending on was $40 a barrel.
Okay.
And oil went to $20 a barrel. And I imagine that those guys are no longer in banking, or at least they're not lending to oil companies anymore.
Not much.
But that's so back then in 2013, 2014, there was money available to have credit. And really a lot of these wells got drilled on credit, where you had a $100 million revolver. You'd put $15 million into a well, right? And then the production would secure the loan. Yeah. Well, if your rock bottom assumption is $40 and you're selling it at 20, and actually in the Permian Basin, which is West Texas, they were constrained. They didn't have enough pipelines to get the oil out. So even when the kind of the WTI price was $50 or $60. These guys were getting hit with $15 and $20 a barrel discounts just to get in line to get their barrels moved in the pipelines out of the Permian Basin. It was absolutely crazy. And so you just burnt capital in a bonfire. Crazy. That was terrible.
Awful. Oh, man. What can we do? You mentioned pivot in energy, like pivoting to copper. Is that the next oil boom?
I mean, yeah, yes. Electrification is the next oil boom, right? And so I read a really great quote, and I hope I get it right, but I think it was the head of Fidelity's investment research said, in the context of copper, we're going to look back at 2022 and go, oops, because everything right now is very short-sighted. We're not putting money, we're not deploying capital right now based on kind of the mid to longer term macro. We're looking at, oh shit, banks are defaulting. Oh, inflation's high. Oh, the U.S. might default on their credit. Oh, the debt ceiling. Oh, all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so we're like, maybe I had cash. No, I can't take that. It's too much risk. The math on how much copper we need is unassailable. If you believe that Ford and GM and Volkswagen and Mercedes are serious about transitioning to electric vehicles, and you believe that they're going to make those capital investments that they've said they're going to make, the amount of copper that we need, we can't supply. And it's 5 years.
Yeah.
It's 5 years. Like we can't, when copper production went down year over year from 2021 to 2022, and we needed it to go up significantly, to kind of meet the projections of demand, copper's the place to be.
It has to be.
It has to be.
Right? Like there are no new mines. Discoveries are lacking.
Yeah.
And that's why you're in the discovery game.
And that's why I'm in the discovery game. I think that eventually copper in North America is going to be very valuable. And what the projects that we have, they're drill ready projects. They're kind of between Highland Valley and Copper Mountain it's an absolutely prolific copper and gold district. And they've been in the hands of private companies, and they're finally, we finally pried them loose. And I'm really excited to raise money and go out and drill these things.
Okay, tell me more about that deal. Like we're not going to wave the flag and promote the financing itself.
Okay, no.
I'm curious about valuation and use of proceeds, obviously, right? And next steps, timelines, things like that.
Sure. I'll tell you why I agreed to do this, because I love being a newsletter writer, right? I like writing. I like doing the detective work and figuring out where we can make money no matter what the market is. And we keep a scorecard, right? So I said, I told you about this company on X date. Here we are today. And if we're down, I take my lumps, but if we're up, I'm like, and so the goal is to just to beat the index or to beat the S&P. And I think of it as using intellectual capital to make money. And I like doing that. I mean, that's the reward. It's that mental kind of, that's fun. And I see mining exploration as exactly the same game. It's taking an intellectual exercise based on geology and based on samples and geophysics and remote sensing data, and then finding out if you're correct. And if you are, it's a 10x, right? That's the value proposition of exploration. And I really like that, right? When you think about projects, we don't even need to think about specifics, but we think about consolidated moose pasture, to steal Rick's example, right? You're in the wilds of Ontario. The only time you can get to your project is on an ice road. Drill costs are really high versus having projects in just great locations where we know that there have been big copper discoveries in the past. We have highways, we have a population that supports mining, we have electrical infrastructure to build a mine. I mean, your risk to reward is so much better over here that should be priced correctly, right? So this should be cheap and this should be more expensive. But in today's market, this is not more expensive because nobody cares.
No.
There are crickets around it, right? So that's the sort of project that I want to get behind with Quetzal. Those are the projects we have in BC, and we have one in Chihuahua that's really interesting, really exciting as well. Old, turn of the century surface mining of high grade copper. They mined it in the 70s and the 80s very shallowly.
I was going to say, like, Chihuahua isn't really known for
it's
copper.
Not, and this
more
is
of a silver district.
Yeah, and this is actually a really interesting geologically. No silica. It's what they call a carbonate replacement deposit. So it's the copper mineralization is controlled by the faults. So you have it's a not quite vertical but subvertical. Has been drilled very shallowly, and the best copper intercepts are as they got deeper in the system. Okay. Very exciting, and it's 50 kilometers from an operating lead zinc mine, so it's good, the right jurisdiction, right?
Perfect.
So yeah.
How much are you looking to raise, and of course, use of proceeds, timeline to listing? Sure. Let's run through that. Real quick.
I mean, high level, we're looking to raise between $3 and $5 million. It's a tight market. And so that's kind of why I'm in town. I can take Zoom calls, but I really want to look people in the eye and explain to them why I'm here, what I'm doing, how I got here, and what we have to offer.
Makes a world of difference, by the way.
I think so. And I know that there are some CEOs that hate speaking, but man, I've spent the last 20 years, more than 20 years, because even in graduate school, like I taught classes at the University of North Carolina, was basically rocks for jocks. So I'd get up in front of 120 undergrads who just wanted to see me fall on my face, and I'd try and teach them geology. So I see the value of marketing, and I have a geologic background, so I can speak to the technical, but I'm not going to be the guy who's out kicking the rocks. I get to put together my own team. So we want to raise between $3 and $5 million. Use of proceeds is we're going to drill. Princeton's our listing project. It's literally our ground abuts with Copper Mountain. And so it's just to the north of Copper Mountain.
That's an easy drive from here, by the way.
It's an easy drive from here. It's been walked over, for 100 years. But the really interesting thing about it is, they're still finding new stuff at Copper Mountain. Did you see the press release today from Copper Mountain?
No, I didn't.
Oh man, they drilled deep, and they it looks like it has a red Chris comp core. I was blown away. The press release came out literally today. It's really worth your time checking out.
After Hudbay bid for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Perfect timing, right? So, this is an area, Princeton, it's an area that is incredibly fertile ground. It's adjacent to a producing mine. So our economic bar is very low, right? I don't have to find a new mine. I don't have to massively build out infrastructure. I'm not going to have a huge CapEx if we want to build a mine out here. In fact, I think that if we make a discovery here, it goes. Yeah. So what we have is, I see a much lower risk here because of all the things I just said. But if we make a discovery here, the economic value of it is much higher, right? Because of its location. So the risk to reward ratio is skewed, where if we are successful, we make much more, a bigger gain on it, which is what I want, right? That outsized risk to reward is kind of what I'm looking for.
Yeah. What's their timeline for going public?
Yeah, June or July. I mean, it's going to be.
Okay, I got to be cynical here. I'm German, right? So do you think that's the right time to go public?
Oh man, I don't have a choice.
Okay,
but is it the right time? Yes, from the point of view that there's no field work that I can do that's going to change where I'm going to drill these things, and I want to drill them sooner rather than later. So if I could have been in public in March, I would have been. That's kind of the soonest I can go. But what that does is it lets me get in the field. I have a window kind of post fire season and before the snow flies to get on Princeton and drill these things. Yeah. And I think if we have some good luck there, we'll see where it goes. But I want to pivot in the winter down to Mexico and work on Cristinas, because I think that's a really exciting project as well. Yeah. So that's what we're going to do.
Awesome. Fantastic. Matt, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate the insights of the copper market, what is going on. Why is the U.S. behaving like they are? On the copper side, I have no idea.
I have no idea.
It's a bit mind-boggling, to be honest, because they believe in their trade partners.
Yeah.
But we'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
Future is still, it's out there. Really appreciate you stopping by. Where can we find more of you?
You can find me at Mangrove Investor, and you can find me. The Quetzal Copper website isn't up yet, but it's Quetzal, Quetzal Copper.
Appreciate you spelling that, because I asked you earlier as well.
Yeah. QuetzalCopper.com, coming soon.
Coming soon.
Yeah.
Fantastic. You're on
Yeah.
Twitter. Really
I am.
active as well.
I am.
So you're a fun follow. I enjoy it. So
Yeah.
really appreciate you stopping by.
Thanks for
Fantastic.
having me, man.
Awesome.
I really appreciate it.
Everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this conversation about copper, Quetzal Copper, and what is going on in the critical minerals space. Do us a favor, hit that subscribe button. It's right there. Like
Right there.
Yeah, right there. And hit the like button as well. Highly appreciate it. Leave a comment. What do you think is happening in the copper space as well? And we'll be back with lots more content. Thank you so much.